Today my guest is Brent Stineman. Brent, how are you?
Doing good. How are you, David?
I'm doing great. I want to say congratulations. I heard you just won an award.
Yes, I was recognized as one of the Azure MVPs of the year, along with Michael Wood, who you also know.
Nice, good friend, yeah. That's good company to be in. Let's talk about Azure. I think a lot of people that are watching this podcast have heard about Azure, but don't really know what it is. So let's give me the elevator speech. What is Azure?
Azure is a new platform for applications. In a way, you could say it is a glorified application server. So rather than going to something like Amazon where you have to build out a virtualized infrastructure, with Azure, you're really building application components, handing them off to the Windows Azure platform and saying, execute these for me.
Okay. And that can be application code, it can be database, it can be file storage.
Yep, it could be web apps, it could be console applications, it could be non-stop running processes.
Now what you described there, that sounds a lot like what I've been doing for years. I've been building components, I've been building web apps, console apps, and I've been deploying them not to the cloud, but to servers within an organization. Mm-hmm. Maybe several different servers.
Yep.
Is that process that I as an architect and that I as a developer am going through, is that going to change?
Yes. So right now when you go to build those components out, and you go to deploy those onto a server, there's usually a burn process or a burn period where you have to configure the server for your application. You probably have to do some initial deployments and then some additional tweaking to make them run right, then let them run for a while to make sure they're good. And if, say, you needed another server 6 months down the road, that new server, you've got to go through that same process with it. You've got to go through and make sure it's all set up, everything runs right. In the cloud, or especially within Windows Azure, because every one of those old tiny virtual machines is managed in an automated fashion, you know each one of them is going to be the same. Okay. So when you build an application, you build it for the platform, and once it's there, you can say, I want 1 copy, I want 100 copies. They'll manage that for you. You don't have to go out and manage each one of those little servers because of the way you've built your one little component you're handing out.
Okay, so this is the big advantage of Azure, is that this ability to scale up, or scale out rather, without worrying about all the details of it.
Precisely.
Somebody else is taking care of that for me.
Yep, and you also gain the degree of flexibility you can do with that is not something you can typically do on premise, where you get more of a stair-step effect, where you buy more hardware, you cruise along, you need more demands, you buy more hardware, cruise along. Yeah. With the cloud, you can have curves that directly match your usage patterns, even on a monthly, daily, or hourly basis, depending on what you need.
Yeah, because Microsoft can be a lot more flexible. They have a lot more hardware at their disposal than most companies I deal with.
Yep.
What about as an architect? What about are there design patterns that are specific to the cloud that we're going to have to learn?
Yes, so we mentioned the component. Well, when I think of a component in Azure, it's a much more finite unit of work. I'm trying to really break things down to little tiny pieces that are completely stateless, that can easily be scaled. Okay. All right, so when you design your on-premise app, you may have a front-end service, you may have back-end web services, you may even have database services. When you move to the cloud, you almost need to think of it at a greater degree of granularity. Within my presentation layer, what are the pieces of that? Where do they need to live, and how can I build them to help achieve that scalability? I think David Aiken had a quote once that was something about designing simplicity, because that simplicity within those individual components then allows you to couple them together to create more complex solutions.
Okay, so we're talking about composable applications.
Yep, in fact that ties into one of the features they'd announced at PDC that should be coming for Windows Azure this year, is the whole nature of what they call a composite application model. To where you sit down in what's almost like a GUI designer and you say, I need a web application, I need a database, I need a caching layer, I need access control, and you start drawing them out like you're doing a Visio diagram, and when you're done, there's the shell of the code for your solution.
This is what, a tool that you're going to download, or is this the online configuration for Azure?
It's going to be, the way I understand, almost an extension for Visual Studio.
Okay. What else? What else do we need to learn if we're dealing with Azure?
Stateless applications.
Stateless? Well, I'm trying to be stateless now with my web applications because HTTP by default is stateless. Is it more so with Azure?
We need to start forcing that down to the service layer. Okay. More so than we do now. I think there's a lot of people that are still fortunate enough they can say, I'm going to use sticky sessions on my servers and be done with it.
Define sticky sessions.
So when you come to a website, you hit one server, it starts your session, and every time you come into the website, you go to that same server. Okay. In the Windows Azure world, that doesn't exist. So if you've got 10 copies of your web app, you need to make sure that they're sharing session information. So if I go to server A on the first request and server C on the second request, they can share information.
Okay, all right.
Most developers, while we have the ability to do session providers, probably don't take advantage of it.
Right. In the early days of .NET, the only thing available to us for session was just to store it in memory, in the local memory of a single server. And so things such as this didn't exist. And now you have, you can store it in SQL Server, or you can store it out in App Fabric caching or wherever. Is that what we should be doing with Azure?
Potentially, you may choose to put it in Azure Storage. You may choose to cache it locally. You may use Azure App Fabric caching with it. The other interesting point you get into with Azure is you want to start abstracting away your system dependencies. So how many developers will build an app, need to have some kind of logging when there's an error, and what do? Event log. Okay. When you go to Windows Azure, you could potentially write it to the event log, but the problem is, because that's contained within a self-contained little machine, you would have to jump through a lot of extensive hoops to then get that information out of that machine so you can monitor it. So rather than doing that, you still want to have an application that maybe you can run on-prem or in Windows Azure. You would abstract away that dependency and almost create a provider model where you would use your Azure event logging provider versus your on-prem logging provider.
Right, so if we're running if I'm testing it on premises, then I could event log to the event log. In Azure, maybe I want a text file that's just easier or simpler to write to, or Azure Storage or something like that.
Yep, and people are starting to use these patterns. They've been around a couple of years, but with Azure, it really drives home how important it is to abstract that away from everything from configuration information, logging information, any other type of thing that could really bind you to a particular operating environment.
Okay. What else?
The nature of thinking out instead of up. So when you run into performance problems with a server, what's one of the first things you usually run to the network team and ask them to do? Throw more RAM at it. Can I get a bigger CPU? In the cloud, you don't have that. Each one of these Azure VMs, while it does have some availability to scale up and get bigger, bigger processor, more memory, you do hit a finite limit very quickly.
Right.
So you design your applications to, instead of running a bigger one, run 10 of them.
Okay.
And then that's a bit of a different mindset, at least for developers over the last 10, 15 years or so. Start talking to the old mainframe guys. It's back in their world. You're multi-threading processes now, so I can run 10 processes to deal with one file and just chunking it up in bits and pieces again. So we've kind of gone full circle on some of that.
Yeah.
But for some of the younger guys that have only been out of school,
like you and me.
Yeah. So some of us younger guys, we're not used to doing that, so it takes us rethinking what we're doing a little bit.
Awesome. Okay, anything else?
I'd say the one other thing, and it's something I'm very emphatic about, that's what's happening right now in the cloud. Some of these patterns and the way we're building applications, this is going to be coming back on premise. I fully and wholeheartedly believe this. I've bet my career essentially for the next 5 to 10 years that this is going to happen. We're seeing a level of automation that's available to people in the cloud that they've been wanting on premise. What I mentioned earlier about having to spin up that server and get it all configured, nobody likes doing that.
Right.
Well, except for the SCM guys.
Well, nobody likes waiting for that. You're a big organization. That could take weeks, could take months.
Right. So you're going to see the tools that we're pioneering in the cloud are going to be coming back on and making more robust solutions to develop private clouds. With that is going to be coming some of these architectural design patterns, the way we break things up, the way we build them, the way we couple them together. That's going to be moving back on premise. And the people that jump on this bandwagon now and start learning and understanding those things are the ones that are going to be ahead in 3 to 5 years when this stuff does appear back in-house.
Yeah, you're blogging about this stuff, right?
Yep.
Where?
Brent the Code Monkey, .wordpress.com.
Okay.
I'm also on Twitter as Brent Code Monkey.
Excellent. Brent, thank you so much.
Thank you, Mike. Dave. I enjoyed nothing more than sharing the information of cloud computing technology with all of my friends.